Hi guys, good evening. My name is Eric Sepulveda. Tonight we are going to be discussing the topic of tenure. For those of you who don't know what tenure is, a little bit of background. Tenure in higher education, tenure as a professor is permanent job contract. I said permanent, if you guys didn't hear that. A faculty member in such a probationary position is said to be in a tenure track appointment. That's kind of the idea they give them. So our proposition tonight is the tenure process in higher education should be abolished in the United States. The significance of this topic we're discussing is the entry into tenure is far too easy for professors to obtain, as well as tenure causes professors to slack and their care for students' education is diminished. So if we were talking about a permanent job contract, just like I mentioned to you before, wouldn't you guys have questions just like we have? Wouldn't you want to know that an entry into this type of job has some type of intense or some type of probationary period that amounts to something, so to speak? Prove the worth, I guess. So, and then the editorial board from USA Today states a teacher in California can gain what amounts to a lifetime job protection in as easy as a lesson in 2 years. So also, B. Anderson from listland.com says tenure requirements are not rigorous. Giving tenure to teachers who have not been required nor have the opportunity to prove their aptitude is fundamentally a flawed idea. School boards may be locking in unbelievably talented individuals, but they are just as likely to saddle themselves with an incompetent teacher. C. Anderson from Listland says tenure is granted too soon to allow teachers to prove their worth. So that, like I mentioned, as little as 2 years, that's way too soon to get something lifetime guaranteed. Tenure is granted in as little as 1 year on average and across the United States in about 3 years. 3 years is not long enough for anyone to prove themselves in any career. Within this initial period of time, new teachers are learning their individual teaching styles, what works and what does not. So he describes here that even in that when they're first getting hired on those first few years, they're still trying to get into the groove of things. They're still learning like their classroom and setup and learning how to raise a desk like this, let alone trying to get tenured lifetime guaranteed. It's pretty crazy. So this explains that new teachers are still finding their groove, like I just mentioned, let alone proving the lifetime. So students are affected, just like I mentioned earlier also. And Anderson D. from Top 10 Lists states there are no proper evaluations made before teachers granted tenure. Effectively, all they have to do is show up to work for their initial period. So editorial board from USA Today writes, a Los Angeles judge struck down state laws that make tenure far too easy to get seniority, a singular shield against layoffs, and incompetent teachers almost impossible to fire. The system, which leaves grossly ineffective teachers in classrooms, often in low-income and minority communities, robs children of the opportunity for equal education. So this kind of goes saying that students, especially in lower income schools, kind of get robbed of the better education. So Anderson D. from Top 10 states again, when hard budgetary decisions have to be made and the teachers fire, tenure protections mean that layoff decisions are not based on competency, but on the last in, first out policy. This means that in periods of economic hardship, children in the most challenging schools are the ones whose education is impacted the hardest. So our inherency claim is the original reasons tenure was instituted is outdated. So it's outdated kind of policy. So journalist J.C. Weatherby from Harvard Business Review writes, at no other time in history has the American higher education system been in greater need of radical change. The place to start abolishing tenure. Originally established in the 1700s to protect academic freedom at religious schools, which is actually now less than a fifth of the 4,700 US colleges today, tenure has morphed into a guaranteed job for life, a benefit no longer enjoyed by any other segment of the US workforce. Have you guys also noticed that no other does your, like a dad who has a job as a CEO, does he have tenure? Is he guaranteed his job for life? Why is it just in education gets this perk? So that's kind of where we're resting here. So J.C. Weatherby also continues from Harvard Business Review, comments on the evolution and advancement that new teachers have have that isn't being utilized because of the older professors are taking their spot. So we've revolutionized a lot and really have had a lot of advancements, but he's discussing here that these new teachers that are being taught with this type of information aren't allowed in because these professors that are tenured are kind of taking those spots. So he writes, tenure also limits how nimble colleges can be in deploying their staff to subject areas that will better equip students for employment. So in order to increase the number of information technology, so he continues with saying, J.C. Weatherby says, it's professors' reluctance to use technology to revamp the way they teach is understandable. Tenured professors, of course, don't have to. However, it's to the deterrent, once again, of the students. So he makes comparisons to further his point by saying, just as union work rules once prevented a railroad engineer from changing a light bulb in his locomotive, tenure protects professors from having to revamp the way they teach. Our solvency issue is simply that we need to get rid of the process of tenure altogether, just plain and simple as that. So Weatherby from Harvard Business Review states again, in the US, research is a primary prerequisite for tenure, meaning that professors of all disciplines feel pressured to research, even if their subject area is static and less critical. So without tenure, it would be easier to shift research efforts toward emerging fast-changing and vital fields. So Fox News reporter stated that tenure is slowly dying in American academy. 40 years ago, at 75% of university faculty had tenure tracks, and now just 25%. So multiple schools also have already implemented the tenure removal and have been successful. One story is from New York Times. Jay Medina writes, going forward, State College of Florida professors will receive annual employment contracts. The college's faculty opposed this measure, calling it a violation of academic freedom that will make it harder for the school to recruit truly excellent faculty. According to one report, the Board of Trustees of the college used tenure as an obstacle to excellence in education. So in closing, the freedom Fukuyama from Washington Post, Francis Fukuyama states the freedom guaranteed by tenure is precious, but it's time to abolish this institution before it becomes too costly both financially and intellectually. Thank you.